Hey there, I'm Robin, and today I'm going to talk to you about writing clean code. So there's a few reasons why I wanted to do this video, and that's because I see a lot of new developers falling into a trap of getting things done really quickly, and this leads to a lot of pain down the line. One of the reasons to write clean code is to make it more readable, and so this will benefit yourself as well as other developers. And what I mean by yourself is perhaps you'd get the early gain of getting your code out there sooner if you rush the code, but in the long run you're probably going to have to come back to that code at some point, and then you're going to feel the pain of not knowing what the code's meant to be doing because it's not very readable, and then having to either rewrite it completely or refactor it pretty heavily to get it clean. It also makes it easier to spot bugs in your code. So if you write clean code, it should be readable. Therefore, if you can easily read it, you can quite easily spot the bugs in the code, which is only a good thing. It's also less work in the long run because, like I said, if you have to come back to it later on, or if another team member has to come back to it later on, they're not going to understand what's going on with the code, so they will have to think about a different way of approaching the problem, or even tidying it up themselves. So if you could do it first time, then even if you do have to come back to it later on, it should be pretty clear what the code's doing and easy to refactor. So the tips that I'm talking about today will be heavily based on this book here, Clean Code, and I do have an affiliate link below in the description, so if you want to get that, that's a great way to support the channel, and I really appreciate that. So what I've gone and done is created a Create React App application, just a simple little to-do app. You can't remove anything or anything like that, so you can add a few different items. And basically all it'll do is add the items to the list. It'll also number the items in the list, and then it'll tell you the total amount. So it's a very simple application, but there's some things within the code that we can definitely clean up, so let's have a look at that. Right, so this is the code for the application, and at first glance it might appear to be pretty basic, but there's a lot of things going on here that we can actually tidy up quite a lot. You can see here's the render method in React, and actually there's quite a lot going on here, right? So one of the principles we can follow is to split things up into smaller chunks. So for example, let's think about how we might actually split this up. First of all, let's actually duplicate this file, just because this is the file that we're working with now, and it'd be great to see like a before and after at the end of this video, just to see the actual difference. So if we copy that and paste it in there, just call it original for now, and we'll edit this one. Okay, so let's split up the different parts of the render method initially, because although you can tell that yes, there's a form, it's got an input with some submission, and then it's got a list and displaying the to-dos. For me at least, it would be nicer to actually separate those out into their own little sections, because it kind of makes more sense that way, and also makes it a lot easier to read. But we'll get there. So let's first start with this form section. So one thing we can do is cut that out of there and create a render form. method, and then return that form. That's just some indentation there. And that should be enough for that. That's its own section now. So here we do this dot render form, and then the next section we've got is the list, which we can then put in its own render list method. And if there's anyone that's experienced with React watching this, you might think, okay, normally we'd put this in other components, and that's totally fine. You can do that as well. Just fix the indentation on that. And output that. And we'll do the same for this last one as well, since the others are doing it too. So I'm kind of going at this one a little bit backwards, but you can see what's going on. Okay, so this should be a lot easier to read now, right? So one of the things that I like to do when coming to a React component is, if it's a class component, I'll go straight to the bottom and check the render method. And then from there, I'll go to any of the other methods that are rendering out things within this list to find what's actually getting output. But I can quite easily see what's actually happening here at a glance, and that's one of the more important parts of what I want to try and get through here. So here you can see, we're rendering a form, we're rendering a list, and we're rendering a total amount of to-dos. Right, let's see what else we can change here. If we really wanted to, what we could do here is render this separately as well, the list within the or the list item rather within the larger list. But I think this is actually okay on its own for now. If it was a lot bigger, perhaps it would be worth splitting out, but it's also worth thinking about at the very least. Also, one of the other things that I like to do is where you've got multiple bind handlers in React, I like to create a method within the class called bind handlers. And essentially, when you've got quite a few that are stacking up, I tend to do it whenever I've got like more than one, basically. Because if they do start stacking up, it can be a little bit cumbersome to read the constructor here. With all of these in there, because it's sort of distracting from what the component's all about. Whereas if they're in their own method, then all you need to do is look in that method to find all of the bind handlers. You know where to look. So basically, if we paste these into here, and then we'd write this bind handlers. And that should do the trick. Just double check that. Yeah, so that's still working correctly. So the other thing that I'm noticing is that this handle add to do is actually doing quite a lot as well. Again, like, it doesn't look huge, but in bigger programs you'll definitely notice this a lot more. So okay, let's actually break down what exactly is going on here. So First of all, it's using prevent default, so it's not submitting the form as HTML forms do submit. It's also getting the number of to-dos, so what this is doing is it's actually putting this number, which is the current amount of to-dos plus 1. Initially this will be 0, so the first one added will be 1. And then it's creating this to-do string, so it's adding the to-do. So this is the string for the to-do, and then it's adding the amount of current to-dos. So this is where you see it say 1 here and 2 here. That's basically all that's doing, this to-do string. And it's also adding the total to the state as well, adding +1 to that. So you can see here that there's actually quite a few things actually happening. One of the things we can do is actually extract some of this functionality into other functions to make it a little more readable. Essentially all we want to see here really is the set state. We shouldn't really be seeing anything else really. Perhaps this prevent default should be there as well, just to make sure it's doing that. So let's take the string out and call it something along the lines of, what do we call it? Get to do string. Okay, so then we can take this out of here. And rather than assigning this to a const, we can just return it. And then in here, we can just get the to-do string. This dot get to-do string. And that should still work as well, so yep. Cool. Once we've done that, essentially this should be a lot clearer. So you can see here that we're concatenating the new to-do string into the to-do state. If we want to do something similar to that for the totals, because you might actually find a situation that you want to do this in multiple places. So if you create another method called get total, a better name here would be get incremented total, and we'll want to pass in state there, paste this. So here we'd want this dot get incremented total and pass in state, and then return that. So now you can see that total is just getting the incremented total. That's all you really need to read there. If you want to look into it, you can find it here quite easily. Another thing you can do with these functions is add them into helpers. So if you create a folder called helpers and a file in there called index, what you could do there then is to copy this, for example, and do that and export it as a const. As a function like that. Then we want to take the name of that and then import it in here. Obviously it wouldn't use this dot getting incremented total, it'd just be get incremented total. and obviously remember to import it up at the top from the relative location. Then if you check, that should be working still. Now the get to do string will be a little bit trickier to move into helpers because it's using this dot state, and obviously this is relative to the class itself. So one way we can get around that is to pass in state to the to-do string, and here you'd put this dot state, and then you can take the get to do string here into your helpers. Again, we want to export it. And we want to take this dot state off, well, this dot off of these, and then we should be able to use that within the main to do app file. Again, remember to import that there, and then we can use it here. Just remember to take off this because it's no longer relevant to the current class. So if we check this, everything should still be working. Cool. One of the other things that we can start to do with this application is actually start renaming things. And this is another part of cleaning code up where really you want to make it as readable as possible. So if something isn't named properly, then you want to get it, you want to make it as clear as possible what things are. So one of the clear candidates here is total, and granted the name total is fairly clear in this context, but if you've got an application where you've got a lot of totals displaying everywhere, then it's going to be something that you need to clarify in this instance. So wherever we've got totals, what I'm going to do is actually add total to-dos is what I'm going to call it, because that's essentially the context this is in. So let's go through and change that. Incremental total to-dos. And remember to update everywhere that it's used. Including here as well. Total to-dos. So obviously here as well, you can kind of see that, you know, to name the actual state, like it's kind of saying it here, right? So sometimes you can see the context within where you're actually using it as well. Also, I renamed this helper, but I didn't go into the helper yet. So if I change this as well, that should work again. Yep. Oh, no. That broke. Okay, so you can see here that I renamed the total to total to-dos here, but I didn't rename it within the actual helper itself. So it's also always good to double check these things that they still work. So if I check now, oh, it still doesn't work. Okay, interesting. So there's possibly something else that I've missed out here. Here we go. So this should be total to-dos, and that should be working again now. Yeah, perfect. So yeah, obviously always be clear with where you've updated everything as well. Also this form, this render form method could be render to-dos form, render to-dos list, render to-dos total. Just to give it a bit of extra context. So, like I say, if you're working in a bigger application, you can actually just go straight in here and just see that it's everything that's in here is related to dos. Let's see what else we can potentially rename. Actually, I think this is looking a lot better now already. Again though, as I say, you can create these as separate components. In fact, let's create extra components for these, just to make it a little bit more realistic what's actually going on here. So one thing I like to do is create a children directory, and then we'll name these basically what they're named here, but without the render. So we'll call the first one to-dos form, then we'll call the second one to-dos list, and then we'll call the last one to-dos total. So what we can do here is take what's in each of these and put them in those components. So you can see here now that I've extracted these into separate different components, and they each just output their own little thing. So again, this is code tidy up, where originally this was all within one big component, so now we've split it up into separate different components. And you can see that if you wanted to see what's in this to-dos total, it's so simple to look at. Same with the to-dos list, and also originally the to-dos form. So what this does is it means that we don't have any extra functions in here to look at that we don't need. All we have to look at in here is we can see that the render the render method is outputting a wrapper div with a to-dos form, a to-dos list, and to-dos total. That's all we need to know, and that's super easy to read. And we can also see that we have methods to handle adding a to-do and to handle the text change. So that's essentially it, really. So I hope you found this useful. If you liked it, then give me a subscribe or a like or share, or give us a comment down below, whatever you like to do, and I'll see you in the next one.